All right, folks, welcome to the Theo Night video for November 1st, 2021. Brandon Chapman with you, and as we look at the market, this name right here, Tesla, they're spreading the wealth in terms of their charging stations. We'll talk about that, but we have new highs in Tesla and a lot of the EV space breaking out. But as we look at the S&P, you'll notice we finished rather benign, right? A spinning top kind of formation here as we're testing new highs and we're grinding higher day by day, incrementally, maybe smaller, maybe even decelerating. Is this to be unexpected? And the answer is no. As we look at the volatility, for example, let's look at SKU. SKU ticked up on Friday to about 148, which is extraordinary. Anything above 130 is high. What this tells you is there's a lot of SKU in the implied volatility of SPX options. What does that mean? It means basically they're pricing in a large downside move. But part and parcel with that is the fact you experience above average up days with much more frequency. And as a result, we see the market grinding higher, yet to realize the downside potential, but eventually it will. The question is when. We're kind of entering a seasonally bullish time in November and December, but we do have a Fed announcement this week. We have a jobs report, lots of exciting stuff going on that could create a little bit of bearish momentum, possibly. So we got a lot of stuff that's kind of hanging in the balance with a lot of the statements or news that might come out this week. Now, as we look at the VIX as an example, what you'll see is that we're not exactly testing new lows here. As the S&P is reaching new highs on a day-to-day basis, the VIX itself has been generally rising, and even today was up slightly. So we're seeing a reluctance of volatility to drop down towards the 12 level, which is kind of that next support. We're really holding on to and clinging to 15. And as of over the last week, we're actually moving higher slightly, which again is indicating greater volatility in the future. As we look at some of the periphery here, as you look at the Nasdaq as an example, the Nasdaq was also up minimally today. But when you look at the sector performance, technology names really brought up the tail end. You got communication, which includes Facebook in there as well, only up 0.16%. You're seeing lagging on the part of technology. You're seeing leadership in cyclicals, which if you consider the last week, cyclicals have been the best performing sector, and the prior 3 weeks, cyclicals have been the best performing sector. And guess why? Well, again, you don't have to venture too far to figure that one out. But as we look at other performance here, we see energy in the mix as well. As you consider what's going on with oil right now, edging higher, we're just kind of following that trend, testing this 85 level. Bullish activity today in RIG, for example, catching a bid. This is an offshore producer, and I'm just going to extend this to the right. You'll notice we're testing the lower end of the channel like we've done a couple other times over the course of the last couple months. But there was some decent activity coming into RIG today at a support level. We do have earnings coming up. So again, after the market today, and boy, maybe it's announced already, maybe not. But what you'll see is there's a gap higher. So the earlier activity we saw in the option market maybe is confirming or that indication. Maybe we're angling higher, but maybe we'll open up similar and we'll have another push towards the upper end of this channel, maybe towards 450 possibly, maybe retesting our prior highs back here. As you consider other areas, utilities in the mix as well, kind of forming a flag pattern here after a couple of strong weeks. We'll see whether or not utilities will go. But again, the biggest influence here is going to be what? It's going to be treasuries. So as you look at the 10-year treasury, kind of mixed today, up slightly. Of course, the Fed can really cause a larger potential move in the treasury yields. And so again, higher yields generally benefit financials. And if we look at financials here, we're basically flat on today's session. Regional banks, however, if you look at KRE was up strongly. And so as you think about borrowing costs, well, look at HYG. This is high yield credit down sharply on the session. So while the yield curve isn't necessarily steepening today, what you are seeing is that lower credit rated, bonds, for example, like junk bonds, they're having to pay higher yields. So maybe we're starting to see a little bit of the risk spreads widen out, which might allow for lower quality loans that maybe carry or your regional banks are lending out. Maybe it provides a better spread for them. So kind of an interesting day today given how well utilities and regional banks have performed. Generally, they don't go the same direction. But this canary in the coal mine here with HYG, which we had highlighted back here because of significant bearish activity, looking for downside towards 82.83. That's still a long ways to go by, I think it was December and January were the expirations here. But today was a pretty significant breakout, albeit we're at support right now, but on pretty good volume. But this is certainly indicating that the Fed right now, that's not active in this market, may be willing to allow risk spreads to widen out and may allow for some selling in high yield credit, which generally is not great for companies that have high leverage. But, take a company like Ford, for example. Well, they're moving higher, 5% today. And clearly, this is a junk rated company. We're certainly allaying a lot of those concerns on the equity side, but the bond market is rumbling right now. As we look at Tesla, this is kind of our focus name here today. Tesla is up another 8.5%. For $1 trillion company to be going parabolic, it really is crazy to see. And boy, it's probably not rational. Here is a $1 trillion junk rated company talking about HYG. Their debt is not necessarily doing great, but their price is. Some stuff they announced today, right? A 3-year contract with the lithium producer, a battery grade lithium producer, GNENF. Nice little outside and huge engulfing pattern today. Gap lower and rallied strongly on that news. This is one of the largest lithium producers in the world. Again, not a ton of liquidity, not a lot of trading, but predominantly trading in a foreign market. And obviously a very, very strong day today. Also news that reported from Tesla was that they're going to extend their supercharger network to other electric vehicles in Europe. And years ago, Tesla kind of gave away that to their battery technology to some degree that allowed people to copy it, right? Which may be tying into some potential profitability from their supercharger network. And of course, when you look last Thursday, the stimulus bill, the expected vote, there was a tremendous amount of activity in the EV space. I did a blog post on our site Friday morning, and some of those names, one of those at least, is Fuel Cell. Fuel Cell got some decent activity, was up on Friday, and now we're really breaking out higher today, up to nearly 20%. Huge heads up from the unusual option activity from last week, but that activity did spill into today's session. And again, just emblematic of that continued bullish activity and the wave that it is riding. And this was just a weekly option in here. You can see how they've tallied up throughout the course of the day into the tens of thousands. But early on, it was the I forgot here now. Got it right here. 13 calls. So it was out here were the ones I was highlighting. 10,300 contracts traded now versus earlier when I posted around 5,000. So nearly doubled. Again, mostly buy side. But again, these options of nearly originally we're trading for about 3 to 5 cents, about the same price. But the idea being is that huge move. This is a broad space that's happening here. For Fisker, for example, FSR, Workhorse, and today also Plug. So Plug was not really part of that group last week, but Plug today moving higher. Again, on significant activity. In this case, it was a 26 November, so not on the front week options here, and a little bit out of the money here at the 45 strike. So again, maybe indicating some expectation, $45 in Plug Power. But a number of companies, Blink as well, BLNK. So what you're seeing is just continued interest and activity in the electric vehicle and alternative energy space. Last week also was for solar. It's continuing to move higher. ICLN, which is an ETF as well, kind of a clean energy ETF, continue to chug higher. Again, all this kind of stems back to what? The potential proposal or the bill that may pass Congress related to infrastructure spending, which obviously green technology. So again, a lot of this stuff's kind of stemming from Tesla, a company that's about in this space that's going to announce their IPO next week is RIVN. It's RIVN. They're looking for about a $60 billion valuation. Amazon revealed they have a 20% stake in the company. They manufacture in Normal, Illinois. They feel they could produce about 150 units per year. Yeah, if you look at these, this is one I've been watching for a long time, just their model cars. Pretty attractive vehicles. They produce, trucks and SUVs and stuff. But again, they're going to be coming out with their IPO Next week, RIVN will be the symbol. Now, as we look at some other names we talked about last week, one was 3D Systems. This stock had some really good activity last week, and it was last Monday. Stock was up nicely. We faded back, and you see the breakout today. When you follow unusual option activity, this happens a lot, right? Where it happens early in the move. And so what you'll find is by tracking this activity, you'll typically enter earlier than you probably normally do. And so you got to be a little patient sometimes, all right? Now, in this case, 3D broke out. Texas Roadhouse last week had a couple of days of bullish activity. And of course, today, right ahead of the earnings, we saw the pop and drop, and then today breaking out and extending its gains to the upside. And finally, today, we had Blackberry, and I'll kind of round it out with this one. The stock was up about 5%. The interesting dynamic with this, if we're to look at an intraday chart on Blackberry, you'll notice a couple of periods here, one at 9 o'clock, and then 11 o'clock, and then 11:15 throughout the course of the day. It never took out the high at around 11:40, 11:42. But throughout the course of the trading session, if we start with the 5 November expiration, it started initially with the 11.50. It spilled over into the $12 strike price, and then it began to move out into the 26 Nov. 4,900 contracts here that popped up during this pop around 11.15 here. So you saw several instances where you saw buying in the stock and big option activity for either the 5 November, the 26 November, and even spilling out here to the $12 strike price for the 3 December. Most all of it buying activity on the calls, and mostly oftentimes very, very quickly. And so this kind of puts Blackberry in a very interesting position. Again, early in the move, kind of breaking out of maybe a potential flag pattern here. If we take out today's high, we may very likely break out of a basing formation. And you look at the width here from $9 to about $12. That's $3. That might give you about a $15 potential target here. And if you look at past short squeezes, in which case the short interest is not as high as it was, for example, in June or January, but could we head to 17? Well, again, go back to that 26 Nov expiration. That's the strike price that was traded. But when you start to look at the implied volatility, it does make it relatively cheap just to buy a call and sell a call in here, do an upside call spread, capitalizing on the skew, lowering your costs, increasing your reward to risk, and of course your probabilities than just buying a straight option. Anyway, folks, it's been a pleasure being with you today. We'll catch you back next week on the video. And of course, we come out with these daily. Anyway, have a great one.